Okay, I think we're going to start. So everybody welcome. It's wonderful to see old friends and new faces, so thank you for coming all the way to be here with us for this intensive 2 weeks. My colleagues and I at ISGAP are honored that you're here with us, and I know it's going to be a great 2 weeks. It's a great program, and you know, I'm not saying this to be polite, you're going to make the program, that your engagement and in the issues with the speakers, with each other, is really what the program is all about. I'm going to start off by saying there's 2 rules at ISGAP, at the Summer Institute. One is that the program, the lectures are mandatory. We really expect you to be here. And the other rule is that this is a space of serious academic and scholarly engagement. And I think this is something that's, in my opinion, is slipping away from Western universities in Europe and North America. At ISGAP, Larry Amsel, professor of Columbia and a friend of ISGAP for many years, coined the phrase of ISGAP-only conversations. And at ISGAP, you have to feel free to engage, to speak your mind, to bring your expertise to the table. You're very welcome and encouraged to debate, but you're supposed to, in my humble opinion, in the spirit of a proper liberal education, is debate ideas. Don't engage in categorizing people, in naming them, in labeling them, and then pushing them away. This is antithetical to what scholarship is all about. So in these seminar rooms, feel free to ask critical questions. Feel free to make comments. When you go for for dinners, I did my doctorate at Oxford, and Oxford is an interesting space. It's kind of conservative. It has an interesting history, which we can engage in critical analysis of the institution itself and where it came from and what it represented for centuries. But one of the great things about my education here, it was really about debating ideas, engaging ideas. And I would sit with my colleagues, Israeli scholars, Palestinian scholars, Christian, Jews, Muslims, people on the left, people on the right, and we would write papers. We would take weeks to write a paper, and I would rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And then I'd take my paper to my colleagues who were Palestinian or from Lebanon, from Iraq, from the left, from Marxists to functionalists to empiricists. And they would read my paper and critique it, and I'd go back for weeks and I'd rewrite it. Taking their constructive criticism into account, I would read books that they recommended, which was, they would poke holes in my argument, and I'd either learn from those, incorporate some of their recommendations, or then develop a critique of their recommendations. And that's what scholarship's all about. So here the space for critical dialogue is open. I insulted him already, but and even last night, my colleagues and I went out for dinner. We were 6 people, and we were arguing strongly, debating strongly about ideas. But it was never personal, and we walked away. It was a bonding experience, although some of us diametrically disagreed with each other's position. But that's what it's all about. And I think this, in education, is so profoundly being corrupted by political correctness on the left, on the right, and I think here we have to return to what education is really all about. So those are the 2 rules. Please attend the seminars and engage in critical questions and dialogue and comments, but please never make it personal and learn from each other. Those are the 2 rules. Okay, having said that, I think everybody knows El Shaddai and Noah, and I think to start off, El Shaddai has been doing this for many years, and without her and the assistance of Noah, none of us would be here. So I'd really like to thank El Shaddai so much for putting this together. And with the help of Noah and the ISGAP team, really thank you so much for making this happen. And I think El Shaddai, before we get into this, do you have some logistical comments?
Hello? Hi. So for today, we're all going to be based here, but for starting from tomorrow, this is the room that Group A will meet in. So this is the room where Group A and plenary sessions happen. And then for Group B, there's another theater called Mary Sumley. We'll show you their signs. You can see it's near the Porter's Lodge. Go around the corner. So for Group B, that's where you'll be based. And then for the breakout sessions, we'll check in with everybody sometime tomorrow to show you exactly where your rooms will be. But it's nice to put faces to all the names, so thank you for coming.
Cool, thank you. And I also want to thank, so part of the team, part of the reason why we're all here is Gail Binderman. I don't think she's arrived yet, but Gail, you'll meet her. Gail's family, Gail Binderman and her father, Norman Alexander, the Norman Alexander Foundation, actually, underwrote our summer institute with a generous contribution. So it's really kind. I think she's coming here soon, so you'll meet her. She's incredible and very generous and makes our work possible. I also want to thank Tricia Ullman is here at the end here, and she's a Board of Trustees member of ISGAP, and creating a network of people who really support our work and helping to get the word out about the work of ISGAP. So thank you for being here. Heidi and Rob Silverstone are here as guests of ISGAP, and thank you for being here and for your contribution to our work. I appreciate it. And Lisa Krantz is also here with us. So thank you for being here and coming all the way from the United States to sit with us. So thank you. Okay, so what I would like to do now is just go around, and I think everybody should introduce yourselves just to take, I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but take like 30, 40 seconds just to say who you are, where you're from, your academic department, background, your position at your university, just to say hello. And I know it's a very brief introduction, but it'll, kind of break the ice. And this will be the beginning. And then I'm going to give a brief introduction on the need for this type of work academically. And Haris Rafiq, who will say hello now, will give the keynote address. Mr. Rafiq.
Hi everybody, so nice to see you all. My name is Haris Rafiq, I'm from the UK. I've been involved in counter-extremism and counter-terrorism now for about 20 years, working at the highest level in the UK. US, I've been with ISGAP now on and off for about 4 years, former managing director for a year, and now currently strategic advisor.
Good afternoon. I'm Benjamin Chavis. I teach at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. I guess my background for the last 60-some years I've been involved in the civil rights movement. I worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a youth organizer, so I grew up in the movement. But I'm glad to be here. I'm on the faculty of ISGAP. Looking forward to a great conference.
Tish Basil, and I have the honor of working with Dr. Chavis as well as a co-founder of the Black Jewish Action Alliance.
Hi, my name is Carolina Ditena. I'm from Argentina. I studied economics and neuroscience, and I teach back in Argentina about this. And I discovered antisemitism, got really interested, and tried to incorporate it into my teaching.
Hi everyone, I'm Marcy Goldstein. I'm from North Carolina, and my area of expertise is actually world religions. And I spent about 20 years teaching about Hinduism until about 8 years ago I noticed that my own people are having a serious problem. So I flipped my career, and I now work for the North American Values Institute, which is critiquing academia.
Hello everyone, I'm Marie Summery from Indiana University. Glad to be here. I'm in the School of Public Health there. I'm a family scientist, human development and family science. So I am here because maybe 4 months before October 7th, I had my first trip to Israel, and it changed my life. People often say that, but it really did change my life. But one of the ways in which it did quickly is that I work with African American family health, which means I work with people who talk about justice and all these things. But there seemed to be an exclusion of Jews when it came down to that. And so can't really have that. So I'm interested in building a course on Black and Jewish history, 2000 to now, so 2000 years ago to now. So yeah, that's it. Glad to be here.
Harriet Jackson. I am the Director of Academic Affairs at ISGAP. Welcome.
Hi everybody, I'm Linda Blanchet and I'm the new Chief of Staff at ISGAP. Delighted to be here. And if you need anything, I'm part of the ground team and come say hello.
Gandhi Khaman, I'm head of research at Yad Vashem, retired from Bar-Ilan University, and coming here for many years already to lecture and to listen and learn, and so that's it. My wife Nora is with me.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Sofer, and I'm the new Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Development at ISGAP, and I just graduated from George Washington University.
Hi, I'm Samuel Maruszewski. I'm from the University of Wrocław in Poland. I'm a PhD candidate in philosophy working on Ernst Cassirer and contemporary philosophy of mind. But then October 7th came and I found myself at the university where anti-Semitism became an open thing, and I just couldn't have that, and that was the start of my adventure with fighting anti-Semitism. And then I published a paper in the Polish journal called the Jüdische Worte, the Jewish word, about globalizing the Intifada and critical thinking. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
I am Benjamin Dorfman. I am the Senior Researcher in Antisemitism at the National Association of Scholars, an institution devoted to instilling American values in higher learning. And I am mainly involved with a study involving DEI and antisemitism in college campuses.
Hello, I'm Balázs Berkovic, originally from Budapest, Hungary. I work at the Campus Center at the University of Haifa, and I work on critical theory and how the Jewish question emerges inside contemporary critical theory.
And you'll be our new postdoc in Paris, starting September, October.
Hi, I'm David Pickus. I live in Vietnam. I live in Da Nang, Vietnam. I'm from Chicago, and there are many, I've also lived in China. There are many dehumanizing trends in East Asia that spill over into movements like anti-Semitic, or not movements, but things like anti-Semitism. And I'm interested in studying the blending of it and also studying the history of the way scholars have tried to combat anti-Semitism.
Hi, my name is Meng. I come from Shanghai and I'm teaching in Beijing. I'm teaching Jewish civilization and Yiddish language at Peking University in Beijing, China. And my current research is on anti-Semitism in China and in the Chinese diaspora following 7th October. And great to meet you, and thank you very much for organizing this. That's a big mitzvah.
So I don't know how you follow that, teaching Yiddish in China. And I want to move my seat. I don't want you to have to follow that anyway. We know each other for a number of years, and wonderful to hear people from Poland and from Hungary. So my Goyish name, I like the good Goyish. My Goyish name is Lawrence Amsel. I'm a psychiatrist at Columbia University for the last many decades. But when I come here, because it's a ISGAP only space, I use my given Yiddish name, which is Laser Wolf. That's a single name, Laser Wolf. Okay, and I use that name because it's a Yiddish word.
Hello, I'm Elchanan Yakira from Israel. I've been, until I retired, a professor at the Hebrew University Department of Philosophy. I got involved in discussion of anti-Semitism first by dealing with what's so-called post-Zionism and anti-Zionist currents in Israel, and then I wanted it up also to deal with
anti-Semitism per se.
Hi, I'm Heidi Silverstone. This is my husband Rob. We were introduced to ISGAP and just find the mission very important, so we're just here to observe.
What she said.
I'm Lisa Krantz. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm here as chair of the board at Brandeis University.
I'm Trish Ullman. It's my second time being here. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Kansas City. I serve on the board of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee and on AJC board and on the ISGAP board. And I'm thrilled to see everybody here, old friends and new friends, and you have an incredible 2 weeks ahead of you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Dory Jesnier. I am also from Kansas City. I just recently graduated from the University of Kansas, and I started a few organizations on my campus, including Students Supporting Israel, before the war started, and then October 7th happened, and my life got flipped upside down, and my brother was called back to the IDF as he's a reservist, and I led a lot of counter-protests. I brought in a lot of October 7th survivors and dealt with some pretty extreme anti-Semitism on my campus. You wouldn't expect that from Kansas, but unfortunately it happened. So yeah, I'm excited to learn from all of you and provide some insight that I experienced.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Stephen Samuels. I'm a historian, most of Jewish history, but also anti-Semitism and photography. Photography is actually important in both the anti-Semitism and Jewish history. And for a little bit longer, a couple more months, a postdoctoral fellow at University College London's Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies, but more relevantly, I'm an incoming postdoctoral fellow for ISGAP in Cambridge.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Creighton. I'm a lecturer in Jewish Studies at the Elie Wiesel Center at Boston University, where I've been teaching for now 4 years, and I'm also delighted to be here.
Matt is also the associate director of the center. He's being very modest, right? I'm Nancy Horowitz. I'm the director of the Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies. I teach mostly Holocaust studies, although I started out as an Italianist, written extensively on Primo Levi, and now on Italian Jewish exiles from Italy during fascism as my latest project. We've been dealing with some anti-Semitism at BU, and I teach some of it in my Holocaust studies courses, but I decided I wanted to learn as much as possible in order to continue doing that work. Great to be here.
Hi, Michelle Burden. I am from Texas. Please don't hold that against me. I just recently graduated with a doctorate degree, and a lot of you know my a colleague of mine, Lisa Worley. We help fight anti-Semitism through ministry work and documentaries. So I'm just excited to be here and looking forward to learn everything I can and how I can help.
Hi, I'm Mariana Mizrahi, Soloway Mizrahi. I'm from Argentina also. I live in New York, in Brooklyn. I'm a doctoral candidate at Azrieli YU. I'm also part of the staff here at ISGAP. I'm excited to join you and learn from all of you. And I'm also a writer, so I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Luis Fleischman, professor of sociology at Palm Beach State College. I've been involved with ISGAP for about 10 years, I believe, and Charles, you have built an incredible organization. Congratulations to you. And of course the team. Yeah. So I am my field of study is Latin America, the Middle East, and democracy. I'm very much interested in the challenges to Israel's legitimacy, the integrity of academic life, and issues related to anti-Semitism in Latin America as well.
Hi everyone. I have jet lag, so I was the 5 weeks I was traveling through 7 different countries, and really I have difficulty to say where I came from. I live in so many countries. My ethnicity, I am Assyrian. I lived in Austria. I'm Swedish citizen. I'm Dr. David Patterson graduate student. I finished my dissertation, and next month I will defend my dissertation, which is about the Assyrian genocide 1915, the impact of Jihad Declaration 1914, and the German involvement. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi everybody. First of all, I would like to thank ISGAP for inviting me. My name is Hussein Cicek. I'm from the University of Sigmund Freud and University of Vienna, and I'm trained in Catholic theology, Islamic study, and I'm working on geopolitics. And since the 7th October, I have this project collecting the Turkish government anti-Semitic tweets, and yeah, simply focusing on who is retweeting them, what are they saying, and I'm collecting them, and I'm training some AIs to understand what anti-Semitism means, and hopefully we can talk about that too and connect each other. And I'm very happy for being invited here, and I'm a little bit nervous. I only expected you guys to talk, not me, so I wasn't prepared.
I'm David Whitus, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. Excuse me. I'm an independent scholar. I'm a JD, not a PhD. I've been involved in Jewish activism and Jewish causes, my wife and I both, for many years, and focused mostly on that. But in recent years, and actually before October 7th, started doing a deep dive on the scholarship around Palestinian cause, and was really quite alarmed. So I switched gears a lot and have been very focused on learning more about the scholarship. This is actually my second opportunity to study in England. I was an exchange student 50 years ago as in a grammar school in Malvern, England.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Bitterwood. I'm a research fellow at ISGAP. I have a PhD from the University of Exeter, and my background is counterterrorism in the UK, and then a focus on extremism and how we can build better cohesion. So I'm currently Director of Research for the Institute for the Impact of Faith in Life as well, which looks more at the cohesion side of things, but I also find it very important, and it's my passion to work on tackling extremism sort of foremostly, but also keeping that eye on positive work like cohesion and positive faith discussion as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe Adam George. We have 3 first names here. I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I'm with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. I'm a national security analyst with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, which is a Canadian policy think tank, and also with the Middle East Forum, for whom I'm Canada research lead for specifically on Islamist threats. My research mostly focuses on Islamist extremism in Canada, terror financing, and associated national security threats, which include Hezbollah, fentanyl, Iran, and so on. I'm sure you heard enough of Canada and the transnational crime hub that it is. So I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank Charles for inviting me to this forum. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Professor Craig Klugman. I'm a professor of bioethics and health humanities at DePaul University in Chicago. I'm also faculty advisor for our SSI, and I founded our Jewish Faculty Staff Alliance right after 10/7, which has become a huge part of my life since then. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Beniciliani, and I'm from Northern Kentucky University. I'm an associate professor there, and I teach history, particularly history of the Middle East and North Africa, the Arab-Israeli conflict. I also teach a class on the Holocaust, and undergraduate classes in world history and in U.S. history. And as far as research, I've mostly focused on anti-Semitism in the Maghreb, and now I'm turning my attention to, specifically in the 19th century, now I'm turning my attention to the United States. And I was focusing on the 19th and early 20th century, and then 9/11 happened, and October 7th happened, and
social work PhD student at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So Nashville people, hi, I was excited. I'm originally from Israel though, so not Tennessee. I realized while being in social work that we don't really, as a discipline, focus on Jewish people or anti-Semitism or Jewish identity, at least in my experience. And particularly from my research, I'm interested in moral injury and how identity formation and extremism ideology formation kind of come into play all together. And so I'm very grateful and very excited to be here and looking forward to learning all there is to learn about this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marla Tokyo. I'm very honored to be here and looking forward to learning with everyone. I'm based in Palm Beach County, Florida, so I very much welcome the weather here. I am the manager of outreach and education for an organization called Insight Through Education. I work closely with educators and community partners to give them resources to combat anti-Semitism and teach about the Holocaust.
Hello, I'm Professor Jeff Bloodworth. My research life, I study modern American political history. I study history of American liberals. And about 15 years ago, I started teaching about genocide, which of course led to the Holocaust. And I come to these things because my research life doesn't enrich that teaching. But most of my teaching these days is about genocide and the Holocaust. And I'm here to learn not just about anti-Semitism from the deep past, but the other researchers today. And I teach at a Catholic campus with very few Jewish students, and it's interesting is that students are when I teach about the Holocaust or genocide, students are very interested. I mean, there's a lot of bad news, but I find that there's some good news, especially at non-elite universities.
Hi, I'm Rona Kaufman. I'm a law professor at Duquesne University, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I used to focus exclusively on constitutional law, employment discrimination, family law, and gender in the law. And since October 7th, I have now shifted / added anti-Semitism to the work that I'm doing. That's what I'm writing in. I'm also developing a course on anti-Semitism and the law, and involved in a conference that is on anti-Semitism and law that a few of us here have been to, and really just trying to do any of that work, as much as that work is possible. I'll be leading a academic study tour of Israel for law faculty and administrators in November, and I'm very involved with the Academic Engagement Network, and now I am so happy to be here at ISGAP and to have this amazing new network of colleagues that are also addressing these issues in academia and teaching. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Carl Kraki-Crandall. I'm an assistant teaching professor at Northern Arizona University's Honors College, and I am a Russian historian by training, but deal mostly with Soviet Jewish history and the Holocaust. But my current research is looking at the intersection of Soviet, Israeli, and U.S. foreign policy and the use of anti-Semitism.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Tricia Allman, for inviting me. I met Tricia through my work at the JDC, where I serve as a part of the GLI board of JDC. My name is Jennifer Sutton. I'm from New York, and I run an organization called Council for Secure America. We focus on the U.S. national security intersection of U.S. foreign policy, specifically U.S. energy policy, the U.S. Israel relationship, and the advancement of the Abraham Accords. And we work really extensively in energy-producing states in the United States to educate them on all of the aforementioned issues and make them actively aware and involved on globalism, specifically the Abraham Accords.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Krassman. I'm a program associate and data manager at ISGAP. I'm a graduate of the Weiss-Liebnat International MA in Holocaust Studies in the University of Haifa, and I grew up in Metro Detroit. And as Linda said, if any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hello, my name is Sahava Feldstein. I am the Director of Academic Partnerships and Network Engagement at ISGAP. I have graduate degrees from the University of Chicago and Stanford, where I was a doctoral student specializing in the construction of Jewish identity and ethnic studies and critical race theory, and dramatically left for reasons you can probably figure out. I am a reformed anti-Zionist, and I'm also a rabbi's daughter. And I'm happy to field difficult ISGAP conversations with anyone here. So, thank you.
My name is Talia Rockman. Last year, for my master's in sociology at the University of Guelph, I was studying the impacts of healthcare austerity and how it impacted nurses in hospitals in Ontario. However, in the last year, I recently switched to the University of Ottawa. Specifically this semester, I'll be enrolled there to complete the remainder of my master's degree so that I can research professors' experiences on anti-Semitism, particularly the stigmatization they face. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Molly Neal. I'm from Liverpool. I just graduated with a History and English Literature degree from Liverpool John Moores University, and I'm one of the Weisel King Scholars, so I'm very, very grateful. This is the first thing I've ever done of this, so yay! I'm Gen X, so I'm really interested in social media and anti-Semitism, and I figured I would kind of lead with authenticity. When October 7th first happened, I referred to myself as an accidental anti-Semite in that I got all my information from social media and was just like, yeah, obviously that's what's happening. So I'm really interested in kind of bridging the gap between the two and kind of using my lived experiences to talk about things like that and fight anti-Semitism. So thank you very much for having me.
Hi, my name's Olivia Boyd. I'm also just graduated my undergrad from Liverpool John Moores. For my dissertation, I researched Nazi-influenced anti-Semitism in the Middle East and how that still continues to affect the Middle East today. I am moving on to studying counterterrorism at Royal Holloway in London, where I'd like to research how terrorists manipulate and use children to further their own political agenda.
Hi, my name is David Marcus, and I'm a math PhD candidate at Kansas State University. Yeah, Kansas. To other candidates. I'm from San Diego, but so I apologize for not being from Kansas. But I'm in math, and so my research is in moduli space problems in algebraic geometry and mathematical physics. So very relevant, clearly. But I'm also the student president of Hillel at K-State, and so been more and more interested in academic inquiry, research around academic inquiry and knowledge building claims in math versus the sciences versus humanities. So maybe a little bit more relevant here as well. And I am also, like other people, jet lagged.
Hi, I'm Jules Freeman. My background is in theology and biblical studies, and I specialize in Christo-anti-Semitism. My doctoral research focuses on the intersection between religion and contemporary politics.
My name is Mark Neuenbrüche. I'm the ISGAP fellow in Cambridge at the Wolf Institute. My background is in sociology. I have a PhD from Hebrew University, and I'm currently doing research on the role of historical revisionism in justifying the 7 October attacks as a just form of resistance, and the role of historical revisionism in current anti-Israel and anti-Semitic discourse.
I'm Catherine Harbord. I'm also from Liverpool John Moores, where I've been teaching the long history of contemporary anti-Semitism thanks to ISGAP since 2019.
Hi, I'm Goni Wong. I'm a high schooler from Dallas, Texas. And following October 7th, I realized that amongst my generation, there's both a lot of misinformation, but a lack of nuance in conversation regarding Israel and broader issues. So from there, I started a pretty interdisciplinary project. But first, that started with helping the Mill Institute bring a constructive dialogue program to my school. From that, I also began doing sociological research with UIUC on certainty bias in university students regarding Israel. And I also do policy research via the Michigan Democratic Jewish Caucus, Spring, which is a Policy Research Institute, and under some other government representatives regarding Israel, specifically how government organizations can help Jewish students or Jewish citizens, not feel discriminated against. And currently, I'm focusing on a historical-based research paper on how 1948 and the conflicting narratives regarding it inform different narratives amongst Palestinians and Israelis, and how those inform current events.
Hello, my name is Iqbal Akhtar, and I'm a professor of religious studies in Miami. My focus, I'm in the Department of Religious Studies. I'm a historian and theologian of Islam, and I do work on interfaith dialogue and particularly peace building. And so some of the work that I work on is looking at Jewish-Muslim relations and Muslim-Jain relations as well. And developing theologies of peace building, pacifism, and quietism. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dave Hirsch. I teach sociology at Goldsmiths, University of London, and I'm the director of the London Centre for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. Hello.
Hello, I'm Lev Topor. I study cybersecurity, anti-Semitism, and nowadays anti-Semitism and artificial intelligence. And I have been an ISGAP postdoc for 2 years at Cambridge, and I'm looking forward for our engagements.
Hi everybody, my name is Peter Raskolkov, and I am from Ariel University and Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University, and my research interests include social media studies and cyber hate. And now we're also trying to establish a brand new master program at Ariel University, communication, public advocacy, and combating anti-Semitism. So I'm really looking forward to receiving some insights from what we have here.
Hi everyone, nice to be here. This is also my first time being in this kind of an academic forum, so very excited to be here. My name is Amir Pagis, I'm from Jerusalem. I finished my IDF service about half a year ago. I served in the education corps of the IDF. And I think, just like many of us here, October 7 had a great impact on me. It was a really harsh day for me. And a very concerning day that made me understand how anti-Semitism is still alive today. And I really wondered what I can do to combat it and educate against it. So I'm really excited to be here and learn from all of you. And yeah.
Hey, great to be here. My name is Rob Jury. I'm a clinical assistant professor at Northwestern University in the graduate school in the clinical mental health counseling program. My lab researches the intersection of Jews and mental health, with current research focusing on the impact of anti-Semitism on Jewish mental health and Jewish-attuned psychotherapy as ways to respond to that. And we've been conducting a project in collaboration with the Israel Center for Deliberate Practice on how to help faculty who are experiencing anti-Semitism respond in a more emotionally regulated manner, so that the emphasis can be on the anti-Semitism they experience as opposed to an emotionally dysregulated reaction in the moment to experiencing anti-Semitism.
Hello, my name is Noah Rosenfield. I'm a PhD student at Yale. I was focusing on 20th century political thought. I was here in 2019, and Charles was let me return for just a couple days this time around.
Hi, I'm Agnese Tati from Sapienza University of Rome. I'm a PhD as well, and I'm an historian of Jewish studies. And my dissertation is about the Iranian Jewish migration to UK. I was here in 2019 as well, and Charles gave me the permission, let's say, to be here again. Thank you so much. And I mean, I was here to do some ethnographical research for my thesis, so I was here already, and nothing. I'm very happy to be here again.
Just as a footnote, it's interesting that you were both here in 2019 and you're returning back here again together. Just an observation.
Hi everyone, my name is Sterling Spatz. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. I am in public health sciences. I do qualitative health research, and after October 7th, I decided to change my doctoral project to focus on the impacts of October 7th on the health and well-being of the Toronto Jewish community. And so really looking at not so much the study of anti-Semitism, but the study of the impacts of anti-Semitism, looking at community resilience and health and well-being, realizing, I think not so dissimilarly to social work, that in public health we tend to focus on other groups of peoples, and even though my faculty has a large number of Jewish folks, not a lot of research in terms of looking at the public health and well-being of the Canadian Jewish public. So I'm really excited to be doing that work and happy to be here.
So I'm the last one. I'm Murthy. I'm the other professor that I mentioned earlier. I'm from Israel. I did my PhD in Canada actually, but I'm now the dean of the Haim Strix Law School in Israel. And my area of research is actually not anti-Semitism, it's criminal law and gender, but I founded in the last few months a new center, new academic center on on law and anti-Semitism that seeks to promote legal scholarship, legal teaching, legal education on the intersection of law and anti-Semitism, based on the understanding that we have in the legal academy. We have law and feminism and critical race studies and indigenous legal studies and disability legal studies and queer law, and we have nothing about anti-Semitism within the legal academy. So this is the aim, and this is my focus, and I've started to research. So thanks for having me here.
Hi everybody, I'm Karen Milner. I'm from, as maybe you can guess from my accent, I'm from South Africa, from Johannesburg, South Africa. I was here, I can't remember what year, I think it was, it feels like 2 or 3 years ago, but actually it was probably more like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's really fabulous to be back. And I'll be talk South Africa's an interesting place to be at the moment, and my discipline is psychology, specifically organizational psychology and mental health in the workplace. But around this, for the purpose of this, I'll be talking about South Africa's ground zero, effectively, for all the anti-Israel slurs, whether it's apartheid, colonialism, or in fact now genocide.
Hi, I'm Gail Binderman. I'm one of the sponsors of this event, and I've known ISGAP for at least a dozen years. I'm from New York, and I'm not an academic, I'm in business, but I am involved very much, besides other Jewish organizations, with Columbia University and Barnard College, and I'm sure you've all read lots and lots in the papers. Thank you.
And Gail, before you arrive, we really thank you and your family's foundation for underwriting this event. So thank you so much. Thank you for underwriting and thank you for coming.
Hello, my name is Joel Katek. I'm coming from Belgium, Brussels, and I teach Holocaust genocide study for 30 years. I just finished a major book on this topic, and I'm working on antisemitism, of course, and I had the pleasure to work with this guy for long years. I've been to all summer universities, I think. Yeah, I think summer universities, if you well, no, summer universities. And I'm also, it's true, I just created an organization called Janatas Institute, dedicated to the fight against antisemitism. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody's so welcome. So I'm going to give a brief introductory remarks, and then will join us for his keynote address. So I know myself and the ISGAP team are happy that you're all here, so welcome. I think also by starting, it's actually very special that we have two colleagues from the Elie Wiesel Center. Elie Wiesel, I'm originally from Montreal, and he had some family there, and I kind of grew up meeting him in our synagogue as a child. He used to come and give lectures there. And we had the amazing good fortune of Professor Wiesel being the first honorary president of ISGAP. So it's very special that you're here. And we have the Wiesel King Fellows. So you guys are here with with the background in Elie Wiesel, and Dr. Chavez with his connection to the King family and working with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. So it's very nice at some level that you're both, very special that you're both here. So important. So welcome everybody. So I'm supposed to give an introductory remark about why it's important to create critical anti-Semitism studies. And I suspect what's interesting, this was sort of my opening remarks every summer institute. And I remember in 2015, our first summer institute, Joel was here, David lectured on it, I believe. He's been here almost every summer institute as well. And for the first week, the scholars who come, it was interdisciplinary, people from different parts of the world, different countries. The debate was ISGAP engaging the study of anti-Semitism as a way to weaponize anti-Semitism to defend the state of Israel? Was anti-Semitism something that was really relevant, or was this just a ruse for the Jewish community and for the Israelis to defend themselves, to stop legitimate criticism of Israel? And we would debate ferociously for the first week, whether anti-Semitism, contemporary anti-Semitism was really relevant or not. Were things really changing or not? And then in the second week, up until this year, actually the CST will be coming here, we would bring the fellows, the scholars, to the Community Security Trust, which is the preeminent security defense organization for the Jewish community. I think it's the preeminent one in the world. It's really the leading model. And we would bring them in for a lecture by the analysts of the Community Security Trust who deal with contemporary anti-Semitism. They safeguard all the Jewish schools, all the synagogues, Jewish communities. They do patrols. They work with local police. They work with Scotland Yards and all the security forces in the United Kingdom, defending the Jewish community. And we would bring them, they would bring us into the Situation Room where they had closed circuit televisions. And they would sort of give a description of radical right-wing, kind of fascistic skinheads that were attacking the Jewish community. The radical left, the radical right, the political Islamists that were attacking the Jewish community. And it was only then, in the second week, that the scholars really began to understand that there was a real problem in this great city, the great democratic, multicultural, international city of London, that the Jewish community had to go to so much, to such an extent to defend their physical, safety in a city like London. So in a sense, many of us who are engaged in the study of anti-Semitism spent a lot of time kind of trying to legitimize the importance of the study of contemporary anti-Semitism. And I think in a sense, now we're in our 11th year at ISGAP. We have over 600 graduates from our Summer Institute from over 40 countries. And the purpose of the Summer Institute was to help scholars, with our experts on anti-Semitism from an interdisciplinary perspective, to help scholars to create courses and curriculum on contemporary anti-Semitism. And this was, the beginning of our work, and now, sitting here in 2025, the tragedy is, I don't have to sit here and speak to you and try to convince you why this is an important area of study. That's the tragedy. Perhaps we should be living in a situation, in a society, in a country, in a time where I'd have to go to great lengths to prove the thesis that this is very important. But now, with the explosion of anti-Semitism, it's clear that this is really an issue for scholars to engage. I also, David Harris just walked in. David is our vice chair and former, I'm going to speak on your behalf, David, forgive me, but David is former director of the American Jewish Committee, the AJC, and really the leading diplomat in the Jewish world. We had the great fortune of David joining us a few years ago as a leader in our team, and David, I can spend hours explaining to you guys how David really elevated the work and the standing of ISGAP. So David, welcome. We're glad you're here. So this is sort of the background, and you know, ISGAP is, we started in 2003. In 2005, we moved our research to Yale University. We were there for 6 years, and we were closed down. We had a vibrant research center there, but every 5 years at Yale University, there's an internal review of all the research centers and institutes at Yale. Yale never closes down centers. There was a center on racism that was dormant for over 20 years, but it still existed in the books. They didn't close it down. And in a secret meeting, the Academic Advisory Committee of Yale decided to close down our center in 2011. And it was at a time when we had the largest conference until then on anti-Semitism. We had about 500 to 600 people at Yale, 107 researchers from all over the world presenting papers. Just a month before the event at Yale, the conference at Yale, the president of Yale offered to match all the funding that we were raising to run our center. They decided to double our budget. A few months before that, I was not an American citizen. I was on a H-1B visa, I believe. And Yale asked me if they would like to apply for me. There was an exceptional program for intellectuals that the State Department would give out a few special green cards every year, and they asked if I would like to apply. So Yale, it was their initiative, made sure that I got a green card under the special program of exceptional intellectuals that contribute to American society. And then, unceremoniously, this review committee, apparently, it was a confidential decision, and that's never been made in the history of Yale. They decided to close down the center. I ended up going to Stanford, where our friend Zahava recently left, but I was welcome there after Yale. And by mistake, there was a vice president of Yale that was extraordinarily just an old school anti-Semite, Connecticut anti-Semite, who was a roommate of Rashid Khalili and was very much opposed to the work that we were doing. And I never really took him seriously, but he was sort of a problem in the landscape of Yale. And one night, sitting in Palo Alto, my apartment, I had just finished writing a book, and as usual, I was months behind the deadline, so I spent a few weeks not sleeping or eating properly to finish the manuscript. I finished it late at night. I was sitting alone in Palo Alto, like 2 in the morning, and I was wired, so I started surfing the internet and looking at hockey scores. Growing up in Montreal, I had to look at hockey scores. And I came across the email of this man, Charles Hogan, the vice president of Yale, and I Googled him. It turned out he worked for a pharmaceutical company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I Googled the pharmaceutical company. Apparently it was owned by the Ben Mahfouz family, so some of those who track radical Islamist financing, they know the name of the family. So this vice president worked for him, and this family, the Ben Mahfouz family, started giving, we found later, tens of millions of dollars to Yale University. So our center was closed down without reason. Michael Oren, who was a professor of history and later the ambassador of Israel to the United States, he was voted twice the most popular professor at Yale. He was kicked out for being too Zionistic. And there was an Iranian Human Rights Documentation Center at Yale that was, their association to the university was removed. And anyways, I started finding this out, and this led to our Follow the Money project, which many of you may know about. There's some of our reports outside. I'm going to speak about the foreign influence of the Muslim Brotherhood in American higher education later. And so this led to one project. At ISGAP, we do various research projects. We have entities. ISGAP is an entity in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, in Italy, at the European Union, and we're in Amuta in Israel. In the autumn, we're starting a journal, the Journal of Alterity Studies. We do publishing and various research projects. We have a postdoctoral training program on critical contemporary anti-Semitism studies, and we're trying to kind of expand the space and legitimize the whole issue of contemporary anti-Semitism studies, which has been, and I think many of you have experienced it, not a subject matter that's particularly welcome in many university settings. In fact, if you engage in the study of anti-Semitism, and I think people who do in this room, I can look around to see some of my friends who have been engaged in this for many years, and I know we all have our scars from the war that is taking place. And I would argue, in a very serious manner, given the foreign funding, given the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, which Harris is going to speak about, I guess the project to an extent, that there was a strategic goal of the Muslim Brotherhood, and we're going to get into these themes throughout the Summer Institute, that their goal was to move Israel away from the West, particularly the United States, to demonize it, to isolate it, to weaken it, to destroy it, the little Satan. Yosef Kawadawi, who started Islamic studies in this university, at Oxford University, Yosef Kawadawi, who throughout his life articulated the notion that all true believers, right, all true believers, are obligated to complete the work of Hitler. This is the gentleman who helped to create Islamic studies at Oxford University. This is the network of scholars that entered into Western academia and into our intellectual and political discourse. So it goes deep. So to destroy Israel, which would be the little Satan, and then the Muslim Brotherhood ideology was to take anti-Semitism and fragment Western society, fragment American society, using anti-Semitism to weaken and destroy the great Satan. So this is the strategic objectives of the Muslim Brotherhood as discovered by American and Swiss security police that was written down 40 years ago. So if we take a step back and look at the fragmentation and look how anti-Semitism is exploding in our universities, and we argue at ISGAP, and I'm sure many of you do as well, it went from the classroom to the encampment to our streets. From the classroom to the encampment to the streets. That at the core of the Muslim Brotherhood strategic goals, backed up by the Qatari regime, the Qatari royal family, the regime has a bay'ah. In Hebrew, a bay'ah is perhaps consistent with the notion of bay'ah in Islam, which is a spiritual oath. So the royal family of Qatar has a spiritual oath to the Muslim Brotherhood and follows the religious rulings, edicts, and fatwas of the Brotherhood. And they're funding American universities, we estimate at well over $100 billion that we've discovered, we've uncovered in our research, but they're doing this across the board. In 1983, so this is some of the work that we're doing. We also have a digital research center where people can take courses with ISGAP. We have seminars, conferences in English, in French, in Arabic, and Spanish. So we're really trying to create an international global network of scholars engaged in the study of contemporary anti-Semitism. In 1983, Edward Said said that he's the last remaining Jewish intellectual, that he was the inheritor to the Frankfurt School of Thought, to the work of Adorno, Horkheimer, these incredible Jewish refugees who survived the Holocaust and came to America, escaped to America, and worked at the New School, at the American Jewish Committee, and other institutions, mainly in New York. And they began to study, the issues of totalitarianism and anti-Semitism in the aftermath of the Holocaust, and created the Frankfurt School of Thought, which is, as you know, a very important intellectual, philosophical framework of analysis. Said said that he was the inheritor to the Frankfurt School, that he was the last remaining Jewish intellectual, and that the Jewish professors in America became fat scribes in the suburbs. He then went on to say that the Israelis and the Jews were the Nazis, and the Palestinians were the Jews. When he said this in 1983, people thought he had a bad day, he was disconnected from reality. But as we know, this has become the discourse. This has become the accepted parameters of understanding Jewish peoplehood, Zionism, and the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel. So the demonization of Jews, the demonization of Israel, the demonization of Zionism has become the core ideology that is being disseminated at the best universities in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and beyond. So this is the legitimization, if you will, the normalization of anti-Semitism. And the Muslim Brotherhood and the Qataris, and before that the Saudis, know if you transform, if you influence higher education, if you influence the universities, where young Americans, young Canadians, young British people, and French people, and Italian people go to learn to be citizens. This is where they learn to be citizens. You influence this curriculum, and you demonize Jewish people, you've now began to influence a generation of future professors and journalists and captains of industry, professionals, and the like. So this has been a concerted effort that's one of our research projects show. I remember going with Laser Wolf in New York. I stayed at his apartment. It was probably 10 days after October the 7th, before the Israeli incursion into Gaza. And there was a teach-in at the School of Social Work at Columbia University. You want something else? You're okay? Zahava? Okay. Oh, sorry. So Larry Laserwolf and I went to Columbia University. And as you know, Columbia University is one of the best universities in the United States, one of the best universities in the world. And Larry and I went to the teach-in on the occupation of Palestine. We listened to leading professors and doctoral students who were justifying, by all means, the end of the occupation. The occupation being the entire land of Israel, or the entire land of Palestine. And that the end of the occupation, by any means necessary, including violence, that the struggle to end the occupation will only, the violence will only end when the occupation ends. When every Jew is removed from the land. And this was not just a bunch of radical kids from some communist party. This was argued and articulated by professors and doctoral students who mastered the literature in philosophy, in social theory, in gender studies. This was the creme de la creme of intellectual mastering of the language and of the discourse of our generation. And they were using the most sophisticated intellectual argument to justify the extermination of not only Israelis, if that were bad enough, but they went on to argue that anybody who stands in the way of the ending of the occupation, anybody who supports the Zionist entity, including and making reference to faculty members of Columbia University, staff members of Columbia University, and students at Columbia University should also be resisted by any means necessary. So in the most sophisticated sense, they were calling for the murder, violence against their Jewish colleagues at their top university in the Western world. So the normalization of anti-Semitism is powerful. And those of you, particularly the young students, the Wiesel King scholars, and young faculty members trying to make it in the academic world, this discourse is not marginal. This discourse is at the core of intellectual activities at our best universities. If you want to get a tenure-track job, if you want to publish in the top journals, if you want to get a degree, a graduate degree, if you want to be accepted, as my colleague David Patterson, who will be here next week, he calls it the moral requirement to denounce the Jewish people, to demonize Jewish peoplehood, to call for the end of the occupation. And ladies and gentlemen, as scholars, we are really, and I'm not trying to be melodramatic, we are really at the front line of the war against the Jewish people. It's a war against the survival of the Jewish people. And the normalization of this discourse in the classroom, which is so powerful, try to deconstruct it, try to stand up against it, try to legitimize the existence of Jewish peoplehood in these classrooms, and you're removed. You don't get tenure. You can't do your PhD because it's morally required, if you want to be part of the club, to join in this call for the end of Jewish self-determination in the homeland of the Jewish people. And I remember my friends and colleagues in academia, in leadership of diaspora communities in Europe, in the United States and beyond, many people dismiss this ideological discourse shifting in academia as a problem for the Middle East, that if only the Israelis and the Palestinians can work out some sort of agreement, all this will go away. And when this discourse shifted in Egypt and other countries in the Middle East, and things started to shift there, a migration crisis happens. Jewish communities in Europe, in France, in Brussels, in the United Kingdom, having to begin to start to have armed guards to go to Shabbat services. Suddenly the anti-Semitism of the Middle East was encroaching on Europe. And then North Americans would say, well, anti-Semitism in Europe, we all know it's terrible, but it's never going to happen here. It will never happen in Canada, where I'm from, or in the United States, where I was living. Couldn't happen here. But we now know, October the 7th, October the 8th, October the 9th, this normalization of anti-Semitism from the highest levels of academic discourse to the thugs on the street. And this is now a crisis where ISGAP, one of the things that ISGAP is doing organically is we're starting to educate and train police forces and intelligence forces on how anti-Semitism is a threat to the Jewish diaspora communities in Europe and North America. But as Professor Elie Wiesel always taught us, that anti-Semitism may begin with the Jewish people, but it will never, ever end with the Jewish people. That history shows this very clearly, that once this virus of hatred is unleashed upon society, it knows no boundaries and attacks human decency and democratic principles. And Elie Wiesel also always taught us that the Holocaust never began with the railroad tracks and the crematoriums. It began with words and ideas, with words and ideas. And the words and ideas that young people at our best universities are learning today justifies the extermination of the Zionists, the occupiers. and anybody who supports them. And the amazing thing is the Muslim Brotherhood, and when we speak here about the Muslim Brotherhood, I am not speaking about Islam, I am not speaking about Muslims. I'm speaking about a very specific, twisted ideology that takes a perversion of Islam and fuses it with European anti-Semitism. They took the protocols of the elders of Zion, the words and ideas that played such a crucial role in legitimizing the extermination of the Jewish people. They took this perverse text and ideas and lies about the Jewish people and fused it with their twisted view of Islam. This is now the raison d'etre of the Brotherhood. This is not the rantings and ravings of the extreme wing of the Brotherhood or the military wing of the Brotherhood. It's a core part of the ideology. Taking the protocols as a core element of the social movement that is horrible. And although they're using anti-Semitism as a core element of the ideology, we also have to remember that the greatest victims of the Brotherhood and its ideology are Muslims throughout the Middle East and North Africa and beyond. And the amazing thing is, it's these liberal intellectuals. Harris speaks about this notion of low expectations, the bigotry of low expectations. That somehow this form or this representation of Muslim communities somehow works its way into places of policy by leading governments in the United Kingdom, in France, in Canada, the United States, and beyond. So this is where we are. This is a threat, again, not just to the Jewish people, but to the very notion of democratic principles. The goal of the Brotherhood is to destroy democracy and replace it with another form of governance. The basic notion that all citizens should be equal under one legal system, regardless of religion, gender, sexual orientation, income, is something that this social movement wants to destroy. And yet, so-called liberal, progressive, postmodern intellectuals support this social movement, from Said to Butler and beyond. So this sort of lays out, I guess, the context and the framework of my colleague Haris Rafiq's opening remarks. And I think really the interdisciplinary, amazing group of scholars that will present to you and that are here with us today to really begin to engage this emergency. I was with Elie Wiesel in the Canadian Parliament in 2003. And Elie Wiesel in the Parliament in 2003 said that he was never so terrified with the re-emergence of anti-Semitism in 2003 than he was since the end of the Holocaust. And he called it a great urgency. And then he went on to correct himself and he said, no, this is not a time of great urgency. This is a time of a great emergency. And when he said this in 2003, from 2000 to 2025, you've got to be deaf, dumb, and blind if we don't see this crisis that we're in. So I think, I hope, I still believe that there is a crucial role for scholars, for intellectuals, to map and decode and understand this crisis, and to teach young people the dangers of anti-Semitism, the dangers of social movements that are not only genocidal against the Jewish people, but want to subjugate women and murder gay people and destroy the political agendas of moderate Muslims around the world. This is really a crisis. So thank you for being here. I'm going to turn the session over to Haris Rafiq. Haris has started coming to the Summer Institute at the first one in 2015. He was the interim managing director for a while, and he's a senior researcher with us now on our Follow the Money project. And he's a friend and a colleague and somebody that we struggle together in this space. So Haris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Do I need the microphone or?
No.
Great.
Down there.
And I'm going to say one thing. Also, Harris has worked with several prime ministers and European government leaders in also North America, advising them on issues of radicalization and extremism, and has created policy approaches for governments in the UK and beyond to deal with these issues. Thank you, Charles. And once again, it's an honor for me to be here. It's since the very first Summer Institute that ISGAP had, 2015, last year was the first one that I missed. And I'm really sad that I can't be here with you for the rest of the week, as I will be rushing back afterwards to go on holiday tomorrow. So, so it's first family holiday in 15 years. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about Islamism beyond Islamists. It's a topic that I believe, I wrote a paper for a Secretary of State here in the UK, post October the 7th, and it's a term, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I want to read out what I've actually written about this. It's a term that I believe that we're actually, if we're just tackling Islamism and Islamists, we're actually still stuck in the old way of pre-October the 7th. And it's a phrase that really captures both the overt and covert dynamics of a movement that is deeply anti-democratic, anti-Western, establishment, and increasingly embedded within our societies. Essentially, it's the 100-year plan that was found within a Swiss counter-terrorism raid, and another document that was actually found for the Holy Land Foundation trial that was submitted as evidence. And we've been asleep at the wheel. We, civil society, have been asleep for a very, very long time. And I'm going to talk about Islamism. I'm going to define Islamism. What is Islamism and what is it not? I'm going to talk about Sharia law. I'm going to talk about Islamophobia. Because I think it's very important that with the next 2 weeks that you have coming up, it's important that we actually use the correct terminology. What is Islam? What isn't it? And then move forward and actually talk about how we got where we are and the consequences of it. The first thing I'll say is that if you're reading a translation of the Quran in English, you're probably reading the ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami interpretation and version, which you wouldn't have found mainstream over 100 years ago. I guarantee, I have about 8 Qurans in my house, in my study. 7 of them are purely there just to remind me of how wrong they are. And I'm talking about interpretation and translation. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from with this. I remember at school, my year, we did our GCSEs, O-levels, a year early in maths and English, which meant when we were 15, which meant that for a year we studied English literature. And we read Shakespeare. And I got an A in my GCSE, English. So I thought, yeah, I know English. I now have a certificate that says I have an A in English. But then when I picked up Shakespeare, although it's written in my first language, and my family's been here since 1901 from my mother's side, my father came in 53, so I guess I grew up as English, not even British. I couldn't understand something that was written by somebody in my language 200 years ago because nobody spoke that English anymore. Now let's talk about the Quran, written 1400 years ago. And the fact that the people in the Middle East are like me. When I picked up Shakespeare, and we were looking at, I remember we were looking at one particular play and one particular scene. I couldn't understand it, and the teacher said, go to W.H. Smith's, which is a retailer, a bookstore here. Go buy some books. And I bought 3 books, and all 3 scholars gave me 3 different interpretations of it. That confused me even more. The Quran was written 1400 years ago. The people in the Middle East right now don't speak that Arabic anymore, so the actual interpretations and the translations, if you want to know what was actually meant, what was actually written, go back to the old scholars. But you won't find that in English, I'm afraid. The closest you will find right now
is a Quran by Dr. Safi Kaskas. That's a Quran that I recommend that if you want to know in English that is closest to the essence, the maqasid, the spirit of what the Quran was written about, and also how that language has evolved, and his lineage in terms of training goes back all the way. So Islam was an oral tradition. That's the thing to remember. Universities weren't a thing within Islam. And in fact, give me an academic from Al-Azhar University, I'll rip him to shreds. Why? Because I've had the privilege of being a student of probably two of the leading sheikhs. And by the way, we were just having a conversation, Zahava and I, about this the other day. A sheikh is not an imam. An imam is somebody who probably gets the lowest salary because why? He's prepared to get up in the morning and do the 4 o'clock prayers, 4 a.m. prayers, because nobody else will do it. That's all it is, leads the prayers. A sheikh used to be somebody who was trained and had knowledge of not only Sharia, of tasawwuf, tazkiyat al-nafs, the sciences, philosophy, art, all the other things and how they've evolved in a modern context at the time. These are the people who passed these traditions, this knowledge down orally. And Dr. Safi Kaskas's Quran is the one that I recognize as not only the Islam that was taught to me when I was younger, but also other things that I found in Al-Azhar and other places as being reflexive of what was written and what was meant, 1,000 years ago, 1,100 years ago. And you will see how different, compare it to another Quran that you might pick up in English. And you'll see even on the very first page a big difference. And then move on and read it. And that's what I would say is something, if you want to read a non-Wahhabist, what is a Wahhabi? I'll tell you in a minute. A non-Wahhabist, non-ISIS related, non-Al-Qaeda, non-Jamaat Islami, non-Muslim Brotherhood interpretation, because these are contemporary translations with political agendas, that's the one I would read. And then I would also recommend, and Noah, I should have sent this out to you, my apologies, a book called Islam and the Future of Tolerance, which was published by Harvard University Press, I think it was. Yes, it was. Sam Harris, who some of you may have heard of. Sam Harris once got into a debate, a discussion with one of my former colleagues. And by the way, I was something that Charles didn't say. For 7.5 years, some of you may have heard of an organisation called Quilliam Foundation or Quilliam International. I was a CEO for the last 7.5 years of that. We were the world's first counter-extremism think tank from the UK, the US. We just started setting up in Canada and then COVID hit and we ended up closing it down. Sam Harris challenged us. He had a team on his side, we had a team on our side. He believed that Islam was pure evil and it could not be adapted, it could not fit into a modern society. By the end of our dialogue, he changed his mind and he also gave us a $50,000 donation, which was great. We didn't ask for it, but it was great. And that's public knowledge, that's why I will share it. So those are the things, and then From Dimitude to Democracy is a piece of work, is a report that I think I sent out to Noah. Oops, I was the wrong way around. Okay, definitions. Have you guys heard of the triple threat to our liberal secular democracies? Okay. It's a phrase that myself and a former colleague of mine, and my colleague's involved, former commander for Osama bin Laden against the Soviets. My former colleagues involved people who've gone out and fought what they call combative jihad. My former colleagues involved people who spent 5 years in Mubarak torture chambers as a political prisoner because he was an Islamist who was trying to instigate a military coup in Egypt, a guy called Majid Nawaz, Noman Ben Othman. These were my former colleagues and the 3 of us on the board. So these are our definitions. We came up with the phrase about 7 years ago because we started as a think tank but then became something else. And we were set up, I didn't set it up, I joined later, set up to combat Islamist extremism and terrorism, but then we realised the threats actually evolved and we are facing at the time, and it's now even more so, a triple threat to our liberal secular democracies, and that's from the regressive left, the far right, and theocrats, Islamists. And guess what binds them together? Anti-Semitism. How wonderful for all the people that are Jewish in this room. Not. My definition of extremism is that it's the desire to enforce illiberal views, because I live in a liberal secular democracy. People say liberal democracy, I even go further, liberal secular democracy. That's what I like about where I live. I'm British, born here, don't have any other nationality, I can have other nationality if I want, I don't want it. And by the way, it's those same values that allow the Islamists to operate freely and achieve what they want to achieve. So I believe that the extremism is a desire to enforce illiberal views, which are in dichotomy to the liberal values that we in a liberal secular democracy adhere to. And you can have non-violent ones and violent ones. Surprise, surprise. Everybody focuses on Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas. Without the non-violent ideological extremism and the ideology, they wouldn't exist. Al-Qaeda, Hamas, ISIS, all these groups did not breed extremism. Extremism bred them. And that's the key thing to remember. And it's not always Islamist, it's left and right. They have a symbiotic relationship. And some people move between the different extremes. So what is Islamism? Well, it's not a made-up word. The Muslim Brotherhood call themselves Islamiyun. They call themselves Islamists. Great, you can use it. And you can refer to them. And why did they do it? Because they wanted to differentiate themselves from the Muslims in Egypt at that time. Islam versus Islamism. There is a big difference. Islam, in the same way that there's a difference between social and socialism. Social is the way that we interact. Socialism is a distinct political ideology that happens to be left of centre. Islam is a religion practiced by nearly 2 billion people around the world, often excommunicating each other because they have theological differences. Islamism is a distinct political ideology. And it has two things, and the third one is a tactic. The first one, I'm paraphrasing, but it's all from their text. The first one is to set up a utopian state and enforce a version of law, jurisprudence, based on Sharia. By the way, there's no such thing as Sharia law. Wow. There's no such thing as Sharia law, as state law. I'll tell you why. If you look at Sharia and you look at law in the English language, law is the noun, Sharia is the adjective. In Arabic, if you did a search with an electronic Quran or an electronic hadith, the Arabic word for law is qanun. You won't find it. You will not find it. You'll find Sharia as a noun. And what it literally means is the personal path to the oasis, and the oasis represents purification of the self. And Sharia is a personal code. What these guys want is fiqh, jurisprudence, a state law based on their interpretation of Sharia. Never been done in over 1400 years of Islamic existence, apart from certain pockets. Andalusia, right at the end, they tried it, right at the end. ISIS did it. Iran does it. Some other countries have done it. Saudi Arabia tried to do it. Now they're actually moved away from it. And by the way, I also work in the Middle East for the last 4 years as a consultant advisor to various people as well. Islamism wants to set a utopian Islamist state to enforce their version of law based on their interpretation of Sharia as state law. Objective number one. They said it, I'm not saying it. Objective number two, to spread that around the world until, in inverted commas, God's flag is on every part of the earth. Wow. Do you think everybody's going to accept that? No. That means they're going to have to fight. At some stage, they will fight to spread that. And the third thing is the tactic. Charles alluded to this. They don't actually even care about Israel, really. For the Shia Islamists, Jerusalem isn't actually even a holy place. They don't believe, and I've been to Jerusalem many times, Sunnis do, but Shia don't, for example. They don't actually even believe that the Temple Mount or Beit al-Maqdis is the place where Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to heaven. They believe it's somewhere else. It's a tactic. This is the opium of the masses. Anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-inverted commas Zionism where they actually mean Jews. It's the opium of the masses. It's a way to recruit, it's a way to infiltrate, and it's a tactic. And of course you have all of these people on the left-hand side who are the fathers and the grandfathers of modern-day Islamism. You have people like, I mean, a lot of people talk about the guy, so the Muslim Brotherhood was set up by al-Banna. People know about him. Then Qutb was the main ideologue. What people don't know is that Qutb learned a lot of his things from the Jamaat Islami. We often forget about Jamaat Islami. Islamism from India and Pakistan and that region. They have differences from the Muslim Brotherhood. But Qutb learned from him. He learned two things. One about Hakimiyya, which is the God's law versus a state law, and the other one Jahiliyyah, the state of ignorance. They're the two concepts, amongst other things, that he learned. So this, when talking about Islamism in the American context, or parts of Europe or actually Canada, even a little bit different these days, because a lot of people from India and Pakistan have gone out there. It's Muslim Brotherhood, but if you look at the UK, it's Jamaat Islami and Muslim Brotherhood. You guys in the US may know of an organization called CARE, Muslim Brotherhood ideology affiliations and whatever you want to say. Have you guys heard of an organization called ICNA? Well, they also exist and they're also big, especially in New York. They're not Muslim Brotherhood, they're Jamaat Islami, but they work together. They're also very big. And ICNA, usually if you have Indians or Pakistani people that have, immigrants that have set up, 7 or 8 times out of 10 it'll be Jamaat Islami. Now, they may have been taken over. The Muslim Association of Students, or FOSIS here in the UK, was set up by 3 entities, Jamaat Islami, Muslim Brotherhood, and Wahhabi Salafis. 3 entities set them up. And they have veto powers in the constitution. However, over time, the Muslim Brotherhood ideologies have become the most, I guess, the most aggressive, and they've sort of risen to the top. I will Q&A at the end. Please save your question. So I mentioned what Islamism is, and they believe in autocracy. I mentioned about Sharia law, fiqh jurisprudence, dawla. There's no concept in traditional classical Islam of dawla, state. There's no concept. It doesn't exist. Again, do a search in the in Hadith, do a search in the Quran. These are contemporary definitions that have come through. And I mentioned that Sharia, as state law, has never been implemented apart from a short period in Andalusia. I mentioned Wahhabi. Wahhabism is named after, I don't even like to call him a scholar, but he was more of an activist. It was a guy called Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in modern day Saudi Arabia, in Najd, in Riyadh. And he didn't like the fact that Ottomans were ruling over Arabs. But he couldn't muster up an army. He couldn't muster up support to fight them. So what he did was he actually created this new reformation within Islam. He didn't make it up. He got it from Ibn Taymiyyah, and many other people took aspects from that. And he wrote a book called Kitab al-Tawheed. And there's 6 key areas which meant you could ostracize Muslims that didn't have the same views as him. But guess what? Also, you could, for the first time within Islam, people who were Jewish, who were Christian, or people who believed in one God were no longer monotheistic. They were no longer mu'mins, believers, and therefore they were out of the picture as well. He was one of the modern day theological drivers that underpin the Islamist political ideology. And you have 3 types. You have the quietists, who basically, a bit like the Amish. Then you have the revolutionaries. These are the guys that are sitting on the street with the stalls, etc. And then you have the jihadists. So what's a jihadist? I mentioned Islamism. A jihadist is somebody who believes in the use of violence for the cause of Islamism, as opposed to jihad. There are 13 classifications of jihad. The highest one being Jihad al-Akbar, which is the day-to-day struggle that an individual has to do good rather than bad. But you have Jihad Qital as well. And again, you won't find that in the Quran. But that's something that modern-day contemporary scholars came up with. And so this is the other thing. A lot of people say that Islam inherent within its text is colonial, and has colonial and imperialistic beliefs and objectives. I would disagree with that. What I will say, though, is there are many Muslims over the last 1400 years that have used Islam, just in the same way that the Pope used text to justify the Crusades. You can give me a piece of text and I can use it for good, or I can use it for bad. I could do that. Many others can as well. And this is the point about jihadism. It is only jihadist if violence is incurred, violence is involved, it's jihad qital, offensive jihad, and it's 8 to 9 times out of 10 in support of Islamism, the ideology. And of course you have Shia. Shia-Sunni divide. That was a political disagreement after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Shia always had separation of church and state until the 1979 revolution. That's why you have people like Sistani in Iraq who don't believe in, or who believe in the separation of church and state. But Khomeini, guess where he learned it from? The Muslim Brotherhood and the Jamaat Islami. He learned the fact, Hakamiya, Jahiliya, the way to govern, the way to bring Islam as a religion to actually govern with his interpretation of Sharia as state law. Didn't exist in the Shia traditions before that. Not in numbers, it may have existed in pockets. But he's, the Ayatollah of Iran is one of the outliers, but he has a lot of support around the world now. Whoops, wrong way. Okay, I mentioned the triple threat. Regressive left, Charles alluded to this. This is a quote, head in the sand liberals who actually live in denial about the ideology of Islamism, and they claim Islamophobia. Can I have a hands up of people who've heard of the term Islamophobia? Okay, no, please keep them up for a minute. Keep your hands up if you believe that that term is a valid and legitimate term. Okay, still a few people, okay. Let me tell you why it's not. And it's possibly an argument some of you haven't heard before. I talk about a liberal secular democracy. I live in a liberal secular democracy. Islam is a set of ideas, a set of values. Islam can be interpreted in so many different ways. I choose to accept a certain set of Islamic values. In a liberal secular democracy, no set of ideas or values should be beyond critique, satire, parody, or anything. Some of you guys may remember The Life of Brian, Monty Python, or other satire. That's the beauty of a liberal secular democracy. However, no individual should be beneath dignity, therefore anti-Muslim bigotry or anti-Muslim hatred is the right term. Islamophobia is a term that is being used, the Iranians kicked it off in a big way, it's being used to deflect criticism of certain ideological positions of some Muslims, including Islamists. By the way, I'm supposed to be an Islamophobe. I was cancelled from Warwick University, where my company at the time, my organisation at the time, was given some money, and we were doing a session on LGBT within Islam, and we're talking about the reforms, Tanzimat reforms that the Ottomans did in the 1850s, where for the first time in a state, homosexuality was decriminalised. The Ottomans did it, and they used maqasid and maslaha from an Islamic theological position to actually do it. And guess what? I was no-platformed by the LGBT society in Warwick for being Islamophobe, because the Islamic Student Union there actually said I was an Islamophobe because I was speaking up against Islamism. Mehdi Hassan, some of you guys heard of? He called Saudi Arabia Islamophobic, the home of Mecca and Medina Islamophobic, for criticising Ilhan Omar on a tweet. This is how absurd the term has become. Anti-Muslim bigotry, and the government in the UK until this recent election held the line. It was anti-Muslim bigotry, anti-Muslim hatred. That is real. It does happen. It does exist. Yeah, Islamophobia is a term that I would advise everybody to stop using, and use the term anti-Muslim bigotry if it applies. And then, of course, we have inconsistency from the left about, we have the bigotry of low expectations. That's essentially the natives don't know any better. It's okay. You know what? We're progressive. We stand up for LGBT, or we stand up for this, but we'll work with these guys, the Muslims, because they don't know any better. Well, the Ottomans knew better than they did in the 1850s. It was decriminalised. They're inconsistent ideologically. And of course, increasingly now the far left. Far right, all Islam, and therefore all people who practice Islam correctly according to them are jihadists. I've been named by so many people who are far right as a taqiyya merchant, as a fifth columnist. I'm a jihadist. I have to be. In fact, I remember one time in a lecture here, somebody basically gave a lecture, I won't say who it was who said that all Islam says that you have to go out and convert everybody, and if you don't convert them, you can kill them. You have to kill them. And I basically turned around to the audience. I asked him whether that's what he actually meant, and he said, yeah, he doubled down. And I just turned around to everybody and said, right, 5:30 we finished. Let's go to the car park and pick your weapons. But you know, it's wrong to say all Islam is the problem. It's wrong to say it's got nothing to do with Islam. Also, Islamism is a plausible reading of Islam. Now let's move on to Islamism beyond Islamists. Charles talks about the project. We have a report coming out very, very soon. It's quite a big report. It's quite a lengthy report that requires a 20-page explanation of the report. And the stage it's at is that an editor will just start looking at it on Monday. It'll examine the 100-year plan that the Muslim Brotherhood put together, that I talked about, that was found and Charles talked about. Hamas did something that nobody expected on October the 7th. On October the 8th, there were protests. Hamas was able to bring Muslims together who for 1400 years actually excommunicated each other. They brought together the far left, they brought together the far right. And, sorry, Charles, give me something. Oh, perfect, thank you. Brought together the far left and the far right. They brought everybody together. This was decades of Islamism beyond Islamists. The reality of the situation is that the ideas, the objectives, the things that Islamists want to achieve have seeped into all aspects of our civil society. Academia has been leading the way, but it's also in the politics, it's also everywhere else, it's also in social media. Islamism is an evil that Muslims have been fighting. There's a civil war in Islam, it's been going on for a long time. Muslims have been fighting, but now it's actually gone beyond that. That's why you see people, and this is my personal opinion, I'm not saying this is an ISGAP opinion, the new potential mayor of New York, and I take no view on Democrat or Republican. I'm bipartisan in the work that I do. I've worked both with the Conservative Party in this country and the Labour Party. I'm consistent in my values. He's not an Islamist, but he is a product of Islamism beyond Islamists. That's a great example. He doesn't want to, by the definition of Islamism, he doesn't want to set up a utopian Islamist state and enforce a version of Sharia state law. He doesn't want to spread that around the world. But this fusion of the left, in this case, or the far left, or the regressive left, or whatever you want to call it, and Islamism is the product that we're seeing in people like Mamdani and others. That's why tackling Islamism on its own is no longer sufficient. And of course, we have the aims are driven by Islamists. They know what they're doing. There's an old thing that the Taliban said when NATO went into Afghanistan. They said, you have the watches, but you have the clocks, but we have the time. It's really a long-term thing for them. And of course, guess what? They see Jews everywhere as the problem. And the thing is, they've managed to turn it from Jews are evil to everything evil is Jewish. That's the thing they've been able to twist and turn effectively in this Islamism beyond Islamist objective. And one of the things I think is very important, and this is something that I think academia has a role to play, and many other people have a role to play. There is deep polarization. This horseshoe represents things that you're all familiar with, political horseshoe. You go left enough, you end up right, right enough, you end up left. That's what that horseshoe represents. One of the big problems that I knew when I was younger what it meant to be English. I was raised as English. Omniculturalism. We try to celebrate as youngsters all the things that we have in common before we looked at my school and society at the time. There were racists, of course there were. There were racists who would get out of vans and try and beat me up just for the colour of my skin. There was no faith-based identity politics. They didn't do it because I was Muslim, they did it because I was brown. Okay, that existed. But omniculturalism is looking at things that we all have in common before we look at things that are different, multiculturalism, and it's been twisted. Multiculturalism, I believe, started with good intentions. But I think that as part of that journey of the last few decades, we haven't defined, we no longer know, and I'll talk about the UK, we no longer know what it means to be British. What are British values? Because we can't define what it means to be British or English or whatever. The Islamists come, the far right come, the far left come. By the way, the far right in the UK are working with the Islamists as well. And what do I mean by far right? Nick Griffin, Jada Franken, they're the actual far right, not the populists. And I think that's also another area of work. Some of you guys heard of the CVE strategy, Countering Violence Extremism strategy? You heard of it? It used to be the PREVENT strategy. The danger. If you take at any given time, there are X percentage of people that support jihadism, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, actual material support, recruitment, money, going out, foreign fighters, whatever. And there are, any given time, Y% that sympathise. That's the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami space. They don't actually work directly with Al-Qaeda. They don't work with ISIS, Hamas, etc. But they believe in the same goals. They're the ideology. And then there's Z% which empathise. They don't believe, they don't support, but they understand why somebody would go out and shoot people at Charlie Hebdo. Guardian newspaper did a poll and said 34% of British public understood why. They don't believe in it, they don't support it. I spent nearly 4 years at Europol. Europol is the European equivalent of the FBI, I guess, and I was an advisor to the head of counterterrorism, Gilles de Kerkhove. He said, I couldn't have said it otherwise, in an open forum sitting next to me in Prague, the shortest time that he has observed, I'm quoting him, the shortest time that he has observed somebody going from empathy, sympathy to support is 2 weeks. He said it. I can't tell you what I know. I actually can't, literally can't, because I've signed, I had security clearance and I've signed many, many things that mean I can't tell you. That's why I have to quote him. Now you understand the danger of not working in the empathy and sympathy support. If somebody is directly supporting, intervention needs to happen, various different forms. True, tackling this is building resilient communities. Academia has a big role to play. Final thing I'll look at, and that's what we used to call the soft end of PREVENT. Charlotte, you'll remember this. You remember this from way back. Charlotte, by the way, used to be a PREVENT officer. Yeah. And this was the whole PVE strategy in a nutshell in 2006. I launched it with the Secretary of State at the time, Ruth Kelly. That was it. The danger of not doing this work means that from empathy to support, 2 weeks. And there was a guy called Ziamani. You might remember this case also. Ziamani was a guy who he went out with a bag and a machete to kill an off-duty soldier in the UK to emulate a previous killing of drummer Lee Rigby. 3.5 months before he was arrested, he was a Christian. Islamism beyond Islamists. He was Christian. He wasn't even Muslim. He converted. This work needs to be done here. This is important. Final thing I'll just cover. What are the pathways? 2 minutes, I'll be very quick on this. How do people get radicalized? Well, first of all, there's no single journey. Everybody's journey is different. There has to be 3 parts. There has to be a lens in the middle. That's Islamism. Now it's Islamism beyond Islam, because now it can actually be the far left or regressive left ideology. It could even be the far right. On the left-hand side, somebody has to have a form of grievance, but it's genuine, partial, or perceived. And on the right-hand side, you have the output, violence. A genuine grievance, leader of the 7/7 bombers, whose name happens also to be Sadiq Khan, he got pushed into this lens because he fell in love. His father wouldn't let him marry who he wanted to, and these guys gave him a solution. A partial grievance could be, look, there are aspects of the UK foreign policy that I have a huge problem with. I was actually, at the time, against the Iraq II war, and actually went on the march and actually spent most of the time in the coffee shop because there were so many people there. What is foreign, and people will say it's our foreign policy. That's why people are becoming jihadists. I would say, what did our foreign policy have to do with hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, going from the West to go to Iraq and Syria and guess what, to kill other Muslims? Because that's what ISIS did. They killed other Muslims. They also killed other people, but they primarily killed other Muslims. And a perceived grievance is made up. In the middle, the lens actually tries to create 7 groupthink types of behavior. The first one is the otherization. Any people inside are one group and the people outside the group are excluded. Collectivization, everybody outside of the group is the same. The oppression narrative, Everyone else is oppressing us, the collective guilt, everybody outside of the group is complicit. Then you have the supremacism narrative. Everybody in the group is superior to those outside. In a liberal secular democracy, none of that is illegal, nor should it be. But we have the right to challenge it, and we should challenge it. ISIS and Al-Qaeda, now you understand the 2 weeks they come along, and other groups, because I'm telling you, far-right violence is coming. It's coming. Far-left violence has started. We just had an entity here, Palestine Action, that was, rightly or wrongly, it's a legal argument, that was actually just prescribed and banned. It's all coming. The 2 weeks now become a bit more clear. Islamist ideology. The Islamism beyond Islamism is taking people all the way up to the 5 stages, and then along come people and say, you know what, we're going to tip some of them over the edge. You have the self-defense narrative and the self-internalization of violence, and for that to happen, you have to have intellectual, ideological, social, emotional, spiritual aspects of this lens, and you need charismatic recruiters that help to change identities, and it happens online and it happens offline. Nobody goes online, by the way, to buy a pair of shoes or a handbag and whoops, suddenly they're a jihadist. You've got to be looking for somebody. Somebody needs to find you. Nobody goes online looking to buy a pair of shoes or something else and whoops, all of a sudden they're an anti-Semite. They have to be looking for something. Somebody has to find them. They have to move through this lens in some way or another. And by the way, final thing I will say, as somebody born in this country, raised in this country, who grew up as a punk rocker, who grew up as many, many other things, inside the house had the Pakistani culture and the food, etc., outside the house was like anybody else. Anti-Semitism in the UK never really went away within the British, English, I can talk about English, not so much Scottish or Welsh, within the English communities and societies. That's another reason why using Jews as a scapegoat for this Islamism beyond Islamist is, from their perspective, genius. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ars. We're a little over time, but we can take Q&A for 5 minutes. Who would like to ask a question? Catherine in the back. We'll start with you. I need the microphone. Sorry.
Harris, thank you so much. I wonder if I could pick up on something just for some clarification. So you said where the Muslim Brotherhood are working also with the Jamaat and Salafi groups, sort of within, for example, student organisations. Why do you think it is the Muslim Brotherhood who are kind of always coming on top there?
I think there's a number of reasons. In this country, Jamaat Islam, so look at the immigration, the migration demographics in the UK. It's talking about specifically the UK. So first of all, before the Salman Rushdie affair in the UK, there was no such thing as faith-based identity politics. Nobody identified me by my faith. It just wasn't a thing in the UK. In the 1970s, we had a whole trench of Jamaat Islami people coming over that eventually set up the Muslim Council of Britain and the Jamaat Islami groups. The Muslim Brotherhood people came over from the Middle East, North Africa, I guess from the 1980s onwards, and of course they started working together. Forces were set up way before that by Khurram Murad, who was sent by Maududi. You had Saad Ramadan, Tariq Ramadan's father, who also was a son-in-law of al-Banna, and I can't remember the name of the Wahhabi Salafi Sheikh. The Muslim Brotherhood had lots more money that came to them because they were Arabic, from countries in the Middle East that were supporting the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, which was intertwined in the Waqf, in the ministry within Saudi Arabia. And by the way, things in Saudi Arabia have changed. I will now say, on the record, and Charles can attest to some of this because this happened to us as well. I feel more safer as somebody, as a Muslim, who's tackling Islamism and extremism, who ISIS has tried to kill on 2 occasions, in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I think Charles will also attest, than I do in London, New York, and other places, and I think Charles will also attest to the fact that he probably feels safer as a Jew in places like Abu Dhabi and Riyadh or Dubai than in the West. Would you agree? Yeah. That's all.
Hey, my question was, this desire they have to Islamize the world, to establish the Islamic utopia, is it a religious, spiritual impulse? Because it's not what we understand as religious or spiritual, or is it about an ethno-supremacist? Is it an ethno-supremacist impulse, or is it about control, power? What motivates them?
First of all, it's not spiritual. I'll tell you where it came from. It comes from what they believe the fall of empires. So when the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire fell, there was a void, there was a vacuum. In Europe we saw fascism and Nazism, in the Middle East we saw Baathism, Pan-Arabism and Islamism. And what they felt, some of those scholars, who actually were quite modern, they were modernists, some of the scholars who the originally before Al-Banna were the ideologues that came up with the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood. They were quite modern. When the Ottoman Empire fell, they saw the decline of the Muslim, in inverted commas, empire had to be tackled, and they said the only way we can tackle this is to go back to what they consider God doesn't like us anymore because we've lost our way. However, it was always a political objective. And I say that Islamism is plausible reading of Islam. It's a perversion, but it's plausible. Political, but the decline of the empires and try to bring back the inverted commas glory days of Islam are the things that motivate them originally.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, but before I do that, Harris, on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for your time.